Welcome back, everyone. Today I was playing in the semifinals of the winners bracket in the Chessable Masters, which is part of the Champions Chess Tour. Now, as you guys know, I won my first match against Vladimir Fedoseev, and today I was playing against Wesley. So somebody who needs no introduction and somebody that I've played against far too many times in the last couple of weeks. So same format, 4 games of 15 minutes plus 3-second increment, I believe it is, per move. And the first game ends in a draw. So we're going to move right into the second game and pick it up from that moment. So here we go. Game number 2. I draw the first one with the white pieces in a Berlin. Sorry, wrong game. My apologies. And here I am playing with black, and he plays e4. So Wesley plays e4. I play e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop c4, knight f6, d3, bishop c5. This, of course, is the classic Gucci piano. Now, all these moves have been played many times, which is why I'm not going to spend time on them. And we reach really the tabia, or the first position, where both sides have different options here after bishop e6 trades and rook takes e6. Now, in this position, Wesley chooses to play the move bishop to b2. Now, he played this against me in St. Louis as well in the American Cup. Lenier Dominguez has also played this against me in other games. In fact, I think some of our recaps from the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz last year feature this variation with bishop b2. Now, here I go knight e7, knight f1, knight g6, knight g3, and now I play this move c6 here. Now, when I play c6, what I'm aiming for is a little bit of a transposition with c4, a5, b5, and d5. I do believe that I actually played this against Dominguez last year, and I figured it's a way to try and contest the center here. Basically, white has a lot of pawns here. I'm trying to break the center, keep this diagonal open for the bishop, and we'll see what happens based on white's reply. Now, the one drawback for white, however, is that with all these pawns on the light squares, if I can get a bishop or a knight on these two squares, there are some positional issues for white to deal with. So Wesley plays queen c2 here. I play d4, trying to close the center because I do have to be careful with tricks like, say I go queen d7, takes, and knight takes e5, and white is simply up a juicer in the middle of the board. So I decide to play d4 here, closing the center. Now, there's a drawback. First of all, the bishop has no scope towards the white king on g1. However, if I can get this bishop to c5 or even a knight on c5, there are some issues for white to deal with. So Wesley plays bishop a3, and here I go knight to d7, and he plays b takes c6. Now, already I feel like Wesley was kind of going the wrong direction at this point. I think he already kind of noticed that there's a slight structural problem where if I can play, let's just say king h1, bishop c5, and takes, if I get this knight on c5, it's targeting all of these pawns on d3 and a4, even e4 as well, and you can't remove this pony from the critical square. So I think already here Wesley was feeling a little bit uncomfortable, and I could kind of sense it based on his next couple of moves. So here Wesley plays b takes c6. I play rook takes c6 in this position, and now Wesley goes rook e to b1. I play queen to c7, guarding the juicer on b7. Wesley plays rook b5, and now I go bishop c5. Now, the reason this move is important is, first of all, my bishop is a bad piece. There's a pawn in the way of the scope on this diagonal. So if I can trade off this bad bishop for this bishop on a3, which at the moment is quite good, then I'm getting rid of a bad piece. I'm getting my bastion with the knight on c5, and it's all very hunky-dory. So I go bishop c5. Wesley plays bishop c1. I go bishop b4 here, trying to plant the bishop here, and now put the knight on c5. Wesley continues with knight f5. I go knight to c5, and now he plays rook b1, and here I play this move knight f8. Now, the reason that I play this knight f8 move is that in the past, based off my games against Dominguez, I remember that Dominguez was playing for g3 and h4 very early, and if white, for example, can get a position with, let's just say, h4 and h5 here, even though this pawn is advanced on h5, it makes sure this knight on f5 can never ever be removed, because if I ever go g6 here, just to illustrate the point, if I ever go g6, I hang this pawn on h6, so I can't ever really remove this knight. And even if I could magically, say, put this knight on e7 here, white can just put the other juicer on h4, and again, white is in really good shape here with moves like queen e2 and queen g4. So from a fundamental standpoint, while I have this great bastion on c5, I do need to take care of the king side because this knife on f5 is very powerful. So here Wesley plays bishop d2. Now, this move already I felt was like really trying hard to be at a disadvantage, because now I'm basically trading the bishops. And if we go back to the position a few moves ago, if you remember, right here, I'm offering the trade of these bishops. So Wesley, in essence, has wasted a couple moves just to trade the bishops again, whereas he could have traded them right at the start. So now I decide to trade the bishops, and here I play this move knight f to e6, which overprotects knight on c5, but I can also jump to f4 and try to attack this pawn on d3 as well. Wesley plays knight b3. Now I go h5 here. Now h5 is apparently a mistake. Now this was based on a miscalculation in a very deep variation. Again, the reason that I played h5 here is based on the lines where white gets the pawn to h5 and you can never play g6. I thought, you know what, if I can go h5 and g6, the knight's going to be kicked out of here because there's no pawn hanging. So just say a random move like queen a2 and g6, there's no pawn to capture on the square, so it's just an empty square, and now the knight will have to go back home, and now black should be doing very well. So the whole point behind h5 was to play g6. Now apparently it's a blunder because I had seen the line that the computer recommends, but I simply didn't realize that white is apparently winning. So after h5 I was kind of concerned about takes and queen d2 with the idea of queen g5, but I thought after g6 queen g5 pinning the pawn, I go rook e8 to stop knight e7. But apparently here after this move g4, it's very, very tricky for black to play, and the only line that I saw was knight to e6, and I thought the queen has to move. I capture the knight, I win the game. Now lo and behold, after queen to h6, g takes f5, apparently this is losing because after pawn takes pawn, if I go knight g7 here, white can go f6 trying to create the lolly checkmate, and after knight e6 king h1, I have no way to stop rook g1, and the king is simply getting checkmated. So at this point it's actually apparently winning for white already, because if I don't take the knight, my pawn on b7 is also hanging, and then the double stack comes to life really, really quickly. So during the game at this point, when I was calculating this position after h5, I saw the line up to g6, and then I just stopped there because I figured with g6 I was going to be going, or not g6, sorry, with rook e8, I figure I'm going knight e6, I'm going to take the knight, it's all good, it's all winning. But as we see, the computer shows that even for someone like me, I miscalculated this line completely. So Wesley should have done this, but instead Wesley plays this very strange move, knight to g3, which is just a bad move. It's a retreating move. It's basically admitting that you're in trouble here, and now I gobble the pawn on a4, and it's starting to go downhill in a hurry. In this position, by the way, I can't capture because white takes the pawn here, and after knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes knight, white is much better here with the double stack. It's even material, and white also even has a better pawn structure here, so white is for choice. But once white goes knight g3 after knight takes a4, you can no longer capture the juicer, because after knight takes knight, queen takes knight, I simply capture the rook, and I'm way ahead materially. So Wesley goes rook a1, I play knight c3, he takes, we swap, and now I go rook a6. Now I spent a lot of time before playing this move knight takes a4, specifically because I was calculating variations in this position with rook takes and knight e2. Now I spent a long time before playing knight takes a4. I was calculating this, and I was originally going to take, but after queen takes e2, queen b6, and queen c2, while it feels like this position with queen b4 is winning and the computer thinks it's winning, white starts to push the pawn, c5, c6, c7, and there is going to be some counterplay. Fortunately, when I was really deep in the calculations thinking about it, I realized before playing knight takes a4 that in this position I can just gambit the pawn and play a5, because at the end of the day, none of these pawns in the center on the edge are going to matter whatsoever if this pawn gets to the end of the board. If I can upgrade this pawn to a queen, it's game over, you lose, that's it, end of story. So I decided to go a5 here. Wesley takes, he takes the pawn, so temporarily he's up a pawn, but this passed a pawn is very scary, and to make matters worse, white's extra pawn is on d3, and I can create a lot of bastions here and blockades with knight c5 and knight d4. The pawn is going down the board really fast, and I think already here white is probably technically lost. So Wesley plays knight c1. I go queen to b6 here, which apparently is a mistake, or not the best move, because after queen b6 white can play this move h4 and go g3, and it's only kind of worse, obviously, whereas I'm supposed to play h4, stopping the pawn pushes, and then I guess I go queen b6. Again, fairly dang, I'm not a 3500 stonkfish, so I don't know what people expect me to do. So instead I play like a human. I play the logical move queen b6, and now Wesley gobbles a second pawn here. After queen takes e5, I go a3, and now it's really falling apart, because even though white is up 2 pawns here in the center, this pawn is going down the board really fast, and the knight is going to have trouble stopping the pawn, in particular because I have this b2 square available for my queen. So say white goes queen c3 and queen b2, you can never trade the queens, because then the pawn is getting to the end of the board, and I will upgrade it to a queen. So it's already, I think, lost at this point. Wesley plays queen b5, and now I find the very important move queen to d4. So now I can go to a1 or b2 as well. Wesley plays queen e8. I go king, or not king h7, sorry, I go knight f8 here because I have to keep this pawn. If I play king h7, queen takes f7, now white is okay because my king is too weak. There are probably going to be some perpetuals or repetitions that will happen. So I play knight to f8 here. Wesley plays queen to a4, and now I play queen a1. An important move. Queen b2 probably also is good enough, but I thought queen a1 was better simply because on queen b2, queen to d1. Now I can move the knight, but I was worried that maybe he can like push c5 or push d4. I just felt like there was probably something. So when I go queen to a1, I figured now when I go knight e6, there's going to be a pin of the knight, and white can't push p. So Wesley plays queen c2. Now I go queen b2, queen d1, only move, of course. If you trade, I get a queen, and if you go queen a4, I just take the knight. So he goes queen d1. Now I go knight e6, stopping either of these pawns from pushing up the board, and it's just over. Wesley plays queen e1. I go knight to d4 here, creating a nice bastion. Plays king h2, and now I have the beautiful move knight to e2, sacrificing the pony because white cannot stop me from escorting this pawn up the board with my current queen. If Wesley tries to take with the queen, I simply trade, go a2 and get a queen. And if you play like c5, you're way too slow, because after takes c6, I can simply play a2, c7, and then queen e5 check, hitting the pawn and the king. White blocks, I take the pawn, queen guards the knight. I actually cover the c3 square, so I'm just going to get a queen anyway. Queen cannot go to either the c3 or the a5 square to stop the pawn, and it's all over. So Wesley plays knight takes, I play a2, he goes knight g3, and now I play this move g6. Now this move is not necessary. I could also just make a second queen, but even though this position with knight takes h5 and queen d4 has to be winning, I didn't see any reason to give Wesley some weird attempt at a fortress with a knight and 4 pawns versus a queen and 2 if I don't have to. So instead I play g6 here, simply guarding the pawn on the edge, and I'm just going to promote to a second queen on the next turn. And with 3 pawns on the board, there's no chance of a fortress ever, even if white can keep all 6 of these pawns. So Wesley plays queen to e3 here, and now I make a queen. Wesley plays knight takes pawn. I take the knight, and he resigns. In view of the fact that after queen g5 check, I do not go king h7. I guess this also wins, but there are potentials for right triangles here with a draw if I'm not careful, so I don't want to allow that. So in this position, he resigns because after queen g5, I can play queen g7, offering the queen trade. White only has a queen, so you can't trade the queen, especially since I have 2 queens. And if white checks, I just go king h7. King is safe here, and I'll bring the other queen back and win the game very soon. So I win this very, very important second game of the match, and I take a 1.5 to half lead. So let's move to game number 3. Now in game number 3, I'm playing here with the white pieces. I play e4 because it's best by test. Former world champion Bobby Fischer played it every game. Pawn to king 4, you got to do it. So here Wesley plays c5, trying to be creative. Wesley normally would play e5, but if he plays e5 and plays the Berlin defense, I can make an instant draw here with knight takes e4, d4, knight d6, takes, a4, takes, d5, takes, check, and there's a simple repetition here. Now in a match format playing with the white piece, you don't necessarily want to do that. With only 2 games left, I'm happy to do that because I feel confident in my performance with the black pieces, and it reduces 1 game or 1 chance for Wesley to win. So with only 1 shot instead of 2, I would have done this for sure. So Wesley decides to play c5, and now I play knight f3. He plays d6, and I play this move bishop b5 check with the idea of playing sort of like a Rossalimo. Wesley plays knight d7. I play bishop a4. We get knight g to f6, and now I castle, and he plays e6. Now knight takes e4 looks like a good move on first glance, but after rook to e1, knight f6, and d4, white has ample compensation for the pawn that he sacrificed in the center of the board. So Wesley plays e6. I go rook e1, a6, c3, b5, bishop c2, c4, and here I play this move d4. Now many moons ago, I had a game against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in the FIDE Grand Prix, and I think it was Dubai, or it was in Sharjah, sorry, city near Dubai, where I played a4 against Maxime, and the game ended in a draw. In this game, I decided to play d4, and here Wesley correctly plays n peasant with pawn takes pawn. If black does not play n peasant, white gets this great center here with pawns on c3, b2, d4, and e4. You can even push e5 to open up the scope, and white is for choice. So Wesley takes, I take back, plays knight c5, and now I go bishop to c2, bishop b7, trying to win this pawn, and I go I go bishop g5, bishop e7, and now knight b to d2 to protect this pawn. So here I've developed all my pieces. Black has 2, but the problem is that black's position is a little bit more favorable due to the great placement of this knight and the fact that black can push these pawns in the center down the road. Now it's not to say that it's losing or anything, but this is not the best way to play this variation. So here Wesley plays h6. Now I go bishop to h4 in this position, and Wesley plays this move castles, and I play knight d4, trying to play it a little bit like an open Sicilian with this knight on d4 and this pawn on e4. The problem is my knight on d2 is much worse than the knight being on c3 here. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Oh, I'm sorry, you guys, I didn't mean to do that. So Wesley plays rook c8 here. I go f3, he plays g6, and now I play bishop to f2. Idea is that I've created a chain of 3 here in the center of the board, and I want him to play knight f1, maybe b4, a4, but I'm a little bit flexible. Wesley plays queen c7, and now I play knight to f1. He goes e5, and I play knight to b3. Wesley plays knight a4, an excellent move. Pawns support the knight, but more importantly, there's massive pressure towards these two pawns on b2 and c3. Here I play rook b1, and now Wesley plays d5, trying to strike hard and strike first in the center. And obviously he's not showing any mercy. So after d5, I play knight 3 to d2 here to guard the pawn on e4, but also to try and get rid of this very pesky knight that is bothering my rook and these pawns on b2 and c3. Wesley plays knight c5, I play queen e2, he takes, I take with the knight. We trade some knights here, but in this position it's very hard to play simply because I have this problem with this weak pawn and this bad bishop and black being stacked on the c file. So after b4, I play this move knight to d2. Wesley plays rook d8. He does not trade the pawns here, because after takes and queen takes c3, I take the bishop, he takes my bishop, and now I win this bishop on e7, and I simply have an extra bishop. So Wesley plays rook fd8, and now I play knight to f3. He goes bishop c5, offering the trade of the dark square bishops, and this is a really bad position, simply because his bishop on the light squares is better than my bishop. This bishop is very passive, guarding the pawn. His bishop is always eyeing this pawn, and so with that combined with the weaknesses on the c file, black should probably be close to winning. So I play h3 to stop knight g4. Wesley plays a5, and here I go king h1. He takes the pawn on c3, and now I make a huge blunder. I play this move pawn takes pawn. Wesley was using a lot of time thinking here, and while he was thinking, the line that I was most concerned about was knight takes e4, and I was looking at this very long line with bishop to h4, and I thought that I was in the game. If I take the bishop on c5, there's knight g3 forking the king and the queen, so I can't do that. And if I play bishop takes e4, bishop takes e4, if I take, there's bishop f2 and bishop g3, and my king is really misplaced here. And if I play bishop takes c5, very simply black can play bishop takes rook, and he's winning the game. So Wesley takes, and then instantly I play this move pawn takes pawn, and as soon as I play this move I realized that, what are you doing? Because what I was supposed to do was trade the bishops on c5 and then take the pawn on c3, so the bishop's under attack. But now when I take on c3, black can go knight takes e4, because when I play bishop to h4, there is knight takes c3, forking the queen and the rook. Whereas before, if we go back here, you'll notice that in this position there are pawns on b2 and c3, so this idea isn't available. So in this position, I'm already mad at myself. I spent a lot of time, and finally I'm like, okay, you just got to move, you got to do something. As Nike says, just do it. So I decided to play bishop h4 anyway. Wesley takes the pawn, and now I sack my rook, and I take the pawn at e5. Now this position is not good for me, but on the plus side, I'm only down a bishop for a rook. I do have the double ops, and also black has some issues here because the rook's under attack and the knight's under attack at the same time. So Wesley plays bishop d6. Now the rook guards the knight, the other rook guards the bishop, bishop attacks the queen, and suddenly black should be winning. So I played queen takes a5 here, and Wesley makes a huge blunder. He plays this move rook to f8. In this position, rook to d7 is winning more or less on the spot, because if I play bishop to b3 in this position, black can now go rook to d7, dc7, followed by rook to c5 or rook to a8. I think actually here my queen is almost completely trapped. Wesley, of course, is not a computer, and he plays the more human-looking move, rook to f8. I go bishop b3, trying to guard the pawn on a2, but also create some scope on this diagonal towards the black king. Wesley plays rook c5 here. I go queen a3, and now he plays this move knight e4, completely fine. Although I do feel like this was a blunder, because after queen a4, he completely loses his mind here. Now, what I think Wesley saw when he played knight e4 is at this point, Wesley was on autopilot. He's like, okay, I'm going to win the game. Match is all tied. We're going to go to game 4, and I'll give it my best shot with white. So I think what Wesley thought originally was he could just go knight g3, but after bishop takes knight, bishop takes bishop, I have this amazing resource with queen g4 hitting the bishop. And you're like, okay, whatever, just take the rook. But if you take the rook, I can play queen takes pawn, because there is a pin from the bishop to the king, and now the game is a draw after king h8, because I just take and I just repeat forever with queen g6 and queen h6. So I think at this point Wesley originally thought he could do that, and then he just tilted out of his mind and he blunders immediately with bishop g3. What he should have played here was simply knight g5, and black is still much better here. Mind you, the game goes on after takes and bishop f2. I have the double op combo. I can line up some diagonals, but for a player of Wesley's caliber, he should win this more times than not. Instead, Wesley plays bishop g3, which is a huge fail, because now I can take the knight, we trade the queens, he checks, and now I go knight g1. I think Wesley simply missed this move knight to g1. I think he thought that I could play knight e1, but after takes, and rook e1, black is just completely winning here. Even though I have a rook and a bishop, the two rooks are much more powerful in the endgame. So Wesley blunders horribly, and after knight g1, suddenly it's a complete pendulum swing, because I go from being in a lot of trouble if not losing to where now I should be winning, because I have a bishop and a knight for the rook. So Wesley plays bishop d6, I go bishop f2, rook c8, g3, bishop c5, we trade, and I go king g2. Now this is sort of the start of the end game where I have a bishop knight for the rook. It's an outside pawn, and the bishop is perfectly anchored here on b3 by the pawn, so black cannot get rid of this wooden shield. On the other hand, however, it's very hard to start pushing p on the queen side, because if I ever push the pawn, let's just say king g7, a4, black can start targeting the bishop on b3 because it's no longer anchored, and it's very, very difficult to play. Now, I do think if I had maybe half an hour on the clock or even like 10 minutes, I could regain my composure and sort of settle down. But here, it's very, very difficult to have the swing because now you know you're winning, and unfortunately, I'm not able to figure it out. So he plays rook b1, I go rook e2, he goes king g7, knight f3, and now rook c7, stopping rook e7 to create the kebab, and it's very difficult. I play g4, rook b7, rook f2, we do some dilly-dallying all over the board here. Finally, we get to this position here after rook c1, and here I make a big mistake. I feel like in this position, I should have played this move g5 to fix these pawns so that black can never push the f pawn. The big issue in the long run here is that if rooks come off the board, at some point black will try to trade his 3 pawns for my 2 pawns and get the king all the way over to the queen side and save the game. So here I play knight d6. Now this move is okay, but it gives black a very critical resource. So I do think if I play g5 after takes, there's a very good chance that I win this game here, and the match doesn't go on. But I'm not able to do that. Instead, I play knight d6, and now Wesley correctly trades the towers, and it becomes very difficult to play. I still think that a computer would win this against another computer, but for a human here, with the pawn being unable to be pushed, and now the pawns being able to advance, black having a more active king as well, it's probably too much to expect to win. So I go king f4, and here Wesley plays rook h3, an excellent move because now he'll gladly give up an f pawn for the h pawn, and then trade off one of these 2 pawns for this g4 pawn. So I take, he takes back, I go knight e5, plays king f6, knight f3, rook h3, and now I play g5, sort of yielding. I could have played knight e5 here, but after g5, king e4, and h5, while I can just take and it's not scary, I was a little bit worried that maybe there's some like g4, g3, and the last thing I need here is to end up on the wrong side of a drawn endgame where I have to prove the draw. Already my nerves are completely shot by this point, so why do I want to do that? So instead I play g5, he takes, I go king g4. I do not take the juicer because after rook to h4, I actually lose the game now. So I play king g4, rook h1, king g3, bunch of dilly-dallying again, and eventually I start pushing the pawn, but it's way too late because now the black king is coming in very quickly. There's a straightforward pattern to get back to stop the a7 pawn, and there's nothing I can really do. Play bishop f7, rook e3, king g4, rook a3, takes, king c5, check, knight takes g5, and inevitably the game ends in a draw. So at this point the game ends in a draw, and now the match score is 1.5 to half in favor of me. So let's move to the 4th game here. So in the 4th game, I'm ahead by a score, sorry, not 1.5 half. Sorry, I'm ahead by a score of 2-1, and I'm playing with a black piece. So if I draw this game or win this game, I move on to the finals of the winner's bracket. If I lose, we're going to Armageddon. So Wesley starts with c4, playing the classic English opening. I play knight f6, knight c3, e5, g3, and here I play this move c6. Now, yesterday in the Armageddon game against Vladimir Fedoseev, we had this line with knight c6, bishop g2, and bishop b4, but I did look a little bit at this last night, and I decided instead to play c6. He goes knight f3, e4, knight d4, queen b6, e3, d5, bishop g2, bishop g4, and queen b3 is played. Now, I had not looked at this specific line last night, but this is something that I looked at some months ago, around like February or March, prior to playing the candidates tournament in Madrid, Spain, while I was in Colorado Springs. Big shout out to everyone who's watching from Colorado Springs or Colorado, probably the best state in the United States. But I digress. At any rate, I had looked at this while I was in the Springs, but this was many, many months ago, so I couldn't quite remember the line perfectly. I think bishop c5 was in my files. I think bishop d7 was correct, and now Wesley took on b6, and this is where I use a lot of time because in my mind I wasn't sure. I knew there were some lines in my files where I'd taken with the pawn, but I also couldn't remember in this specific position I'm supposed to take with the pawn or the bishop, and so it's sort of like flipping a coin in my mind of deciding what the best move was, and I make a mistake. I decide to take with the pawn here. Now, I should have taken with the bishop because it keeps the pawn structure intact here, and white actually apparently is nothing whatsoever, so I do feel pretty stupid for having not played this, but that's life. So I take, Wesley takes on d5, and now I take on d4. What I probably should have played here is played pawn takes pawn, but I was kind of concerned that after d3 anyway, white is going to open up this diagonal, and it feels kind of scary to play. So I decide to take, he takes, I take back, and now he does go d3 because here this dark square bishop is locked in by the 2 pawns, so you got to open up the scope for the bishop. So after d3, I play knight to c6 here, and Wesley plays bishop g5. Excellent move, trying to remove the defender of the pawn. Again, this bishop on g2 is hemmed in temporarily, but with bishop g5, this diagonal is going to open, and this light square bishop is going to become very powerful. Now, already here during the game, I'm like, uh-oh, I've kind of done something wrong with my prep or my lines, whatever it is. I've mixed something up, and I knew I was in trouble, but I told myself, you know what? It's an end game. There should be resources. Just keep going. As they say in the great TV show, The Imposters, I think they say it's always forward, never back. So I had this very much in my mind at this moment. So I played knight takes d4, Wesley castles, and now I play rook c8. I think it's almost an only move here, because if I move the knight away after takes and knight takes d5, it's just catastrophic. I have two sets of double pawns here. I'm losing this pawn at e4. There's knight f6, knight b6. There are all kinds of forks lurking in this position. I mean, it's just feels really, really bad. Even if the computer says +1, for a human, you just psychologically, you feel like you're going to lose this game. So I decide to play rook c8 here, and the idea is that now if white takes the juicer to attack the knight on d4, I can play knight to e2 check, forking the king and the knight. White can't capture because then you lose the king, and after king b1 takes knight takes e4, suddenly there's going to be a trade of one of these bishops for the knight. If white takes here, we end up with opposite colored bishops, and black has great chances to save the game. And if white goes like bishop d2, I guess I can take f2, but even knight takes c3, even this one feels like after bishop takes d5 and castles, that black should be able to save the game. So Wesley correctly plays king b1, sidestepping all these tricks with knight e2 or knight b5, and now I play this move pawn takes pawn. He takes, he does not capture on d3 because after rook takes pawn, there's bishop f5, pinning the tail on the donkey, and I will win this rook on d3. So Wesley plays knight takes pawn. Now temporarily here I am up a pawn, but as you can tell, I have 4 pawn islands. This is 1 pawn island, this is 2 pawn islands. They're of course stacked. I have a 3rd pawn island and a 4th pawn island, so all my pawns are weak here, and it's a really, really ugly looking position. So I go king to f8 here, only move by the way, because I can't castle because of this fork. Total disaster. I mean, if I move the bishop, then white will just go g4 and then f4, similar to the game, and it feels really awful. So I decide to play king f8. He goes knight takes pawn, and now I have this tricky move bishop to f5 with the idea that if white gobbles a tower, I can go check, king a1, and I simply can make a repetition infinitely with playing knight d4 and knight c2, and white cannot avoid the checks. So Wesley correctly here plays g4. I go bishop g6, and now he finds f4. And again, it's a very, very rough position for me because white is threatening to trap the bishop with f5. So I play rook c2, targeting the bishop on g2. He takes the pawn, and now I play this move f5. Already here, it's very, very critical. If I don't play f5, I'm going to lose this game. For example, let's just say I go like rook c7 as one idea. There's bishop d5. If I don't play f5 here, say I play h6, after f5, bishop h7, and let's just say bishop e4 to prevent any tricks here, the position is lost due to this classic dead bishop on h7. Those of you guys who have studied a lot of chess, there's a very famous game between Winter and Capablanca where Capablanca was able to trap Winter's bishop in this exact pawn structure. There were double pawns and there were 3 pawns like this, and it's simply game over. So already here it's very, very critical, and I was just like, I'm thinking to myself, just find moves and keep going. So I play f5. Wesley plays g5 here. And now I find rook f2, again, another only move, because in this position, my bishop is so bad, and if white can take this pawn, white can consolidate in any way. He's just going to run this a pawn up the board, or both of these pawns, and I'm going to lose. So every move I play here has to be perfect to give me any chance of surviving the game. So I play rook f2, Wesley plays h4. Now, if he were to play rook takes d3, rook takes f4, knight d5, now I can go rook h4 with the idea of f4, reopening the diagonal for this bishop on g6, and suddenly the game gets very chaotic once again. So Wesley plays h4 here. Now I go bishop h5 because again, white is threatening to simply trap the bishop on h5. Now, apparently there's this line with king g7 and rook b8, which I guess somehow is equal. Don't ask me how it's equal, but apparently it is. Again, I'm not a stonefish. I can't find all these moves, and it just didn't make sense. So I play bishop h5, a thematic move, because now the bishop at least is on a diagonal where it can be active versus being simply dead on g6. So Wesley takes the pawn. I go knight to e6, trying to win this pawn on f4. He goes knight d7. Now, it's worth noting, if white could play rook d8 and not hang this rook, for example, say you get here and white can go a4, this is just game over with these 2 pawns, because I can't get a pass pawn very quickly here. It's going to take me like 1, then like, I don't know, 2, and then 3, 4, 5. It's going to take me forever to get this pawn rolling, and this a5 pawn is way down the board already. So luckily, knight e6 stops rook d8, targets the pawn, but it also threatens another fork with knight c5 as well. Wesley plays knight d7 here. Now, apparently a4 is winning, but very, very dank move for us humans. So he goes check, I go king g7, knight to f6, and now I find a very important move, bishop to g4 here. The pawn guards the bishop, and now I can activate this rook to b8. We're on move number 28 coming up here for white, and I still haven't brought this rook into the game, but I will bring it into the game on the next turn. And it's already here, I think, very tough for Wesley to play, and Wesley makes a mistake. He plays this move, bishop a6. Now here I play knight c5, forking the bishop and the rook. Apparently rook b8 is already equalizing, but I play knight c5, rook d6, and now I go rook b8. And just like that, even though white is this great pony on f6, this bishop is kind of weak here. The rook is guarding it. It's gonna have to move. I'm threatening to get the double stack on the 7th rank, and it's very, very tricky. Also, Wesley at this point is down to 20 seconds, which does not help matters. So here he plays bishop c4. I take the pawn, which is apparently a mistake. I was supposed to play this move knight to e4, because after white trades the juicers, I can now play rook takes pawn, king a1 takes, h5, and apparently I can simply go bishop takes h5, because after rook takes bishop, I have rook to c2, and now we're going to be setting up a ladder checkmate with one of these rooks on the back rank. Again, very, very dank concept at this point with me having only 3 minutes. I don't really want to use all my time here, because if I use all my time, Wesley's going to be reacting to my move. So I kind of want to use some time, but not too long, because then Wesley will have 1 or 2 moves planned out, because he'll be analyzing while I'm thinking. So I play rook b2. After a minute thinking, he goes king a1. I play rook b4, which is a big mistake. Now again, even at this point in the game, it felt to me like I had these tingling senses that there should be something to save the game, but it's still, you know it's there, but if you don't have like half an hour or even 10 minutes to figure it out, it's very, very difficult. So I make a blunder here. I play rook b4. Now apparently once again knight to e4 is saving the game, but I thought that after takes and I think bishop b3, I just figured that white has to be better. Apparently after rook f2 and rook f6, I can now play rook b7, and even though I'm down a pawn here, because I have this passed e-pawn rolling up the board, I'm completely fine. Again, with 10 or 20 minutes on the clock, I think there's a good chance I could figure this out, but you know, it's a very choppy situation. Emotionally, I know I'm losing, but I'm trying to fight, and also I don't have a lot of time, so you just try to play practical moves, and I make a mistake here with rook b4. Wesley plays rook to c1 here. Excellent move, guarding the bishop on c4, and now I play rook c8. A tricky move here since Wesley only has 15 seconds, because what I'm doing is I'm sort of creating a pin where I want to move this knight away and win the bishop or the rook on c1. So say white plays a move like a3, then you potentially run into a move like knight b3, forking the king and the rook. Apparently this is winning for white after takes and king b2, but the threat still exists. Like even for example rook a4, and you're very worried about all kinds of tricks in this position. So Wesley here plays h5, and now I make a huge blunder by playing the very obvious looking move knight to e4. Now apparently here after knight to e6, I'm completely fine because the knight covers this critical back rank square on d8. So after h6, I can go king h8, and now if white just say plays a3, I can take, and this knight covers this rook d8 move. Now the reason this is important is because when I play knight to e4, the obvious human move, after h6, if I go king h8 here, white can simply trade and then play a move like rook to c3, because now if I take, there's rook to d8 checkmate. So bringing the knight to e6 is the way to save the game. But again, here I thought knight e4 made sense just to trade the juicers, and I figure the pin still plays and I win the game. But Wesley plays h6 check. I go king f8 here, and now Wesley with seconds on the clock plays rook to d7, which essentially gives away any chance of winning the game. Now here the remarkable move pawn to g6 is crushing and winning the game, because if I eat the rook, there's g7 check, king e7, and now white can play knight to d5 check, forking the king and the rook, and with this passed pawn on g7 protected, I might add, needing only one square to become a queen, it's game over. It's over instantly. After g6, the best try for me is to take with the pawn, but after knight takes h7, king e7, rook to e6, king d7, there's now rook takes e4, another excellent move, takes, and knight to f6, king to d6, not e7, because then there's the fork once again, and king d6 and h7, and white is apparently winning here. Or maybe it's not actually that clear, as you guys can tell from the bar. Still only 1.2 after rook h8, but white will have chances to win the game. Now again, with 8 seconds on the clock, if Wesley can find this, I mean, you tip your hat, you just bow down to him, because that's just remarkable. I mean, there's nothing else that needs to be said. I mean, I don't think I would play this move even if I had 5 minutes on the clock. I'd probably need like 20 minutes to calculate g6 after I realized that every other variation doesn't work. Wesley, however, with 8 seconds instinctively plays rook to d7, which is also a logical move, threatening mate and 1 on f7. Unfortunately for Wesley though, now I can take the bishop, because after rook takes, if white checks, I can escape with king e7. Rook e8, king d6 is simply better for black, and if you go rook d7, I scoot up to e6 here, and I'm winning the game. So Wesley takes on h7, and now I go king g8. Another excellent move here, because when I play king g8, if the knight goes to f6, I trade my knight for his knight, and then it's just very easy to play because the extra bishop will come into the game down the road on the light square diagonals. So Wesley plays g6. I take, he goes knight f8 here, and now I just take the knight. Now in this position, there are multiple ways to win. Probably the cleanest one is to play rook c1 and rook to h1 here, but with only a minute on the clock at this point, I'm like, I don't want to risk it, because if I'm wrong, I'm going to lose the game. And I saw a simple way to make a draw here, and if you see a way to make a draw in this situation, you take the draw. You do not try to get fancy. You don't try to showboat. There's no difference between a winner or a draw here. It's, again, like the NBA reference I gave the other day. It's like you have the chance, you know, to make the layup 100% of the time, or you try to be Nate Robinson. Now I know I sound like a boomer because I'm referring to old people in the slam dunk contest, but you try to be like Nate Robinson and slam, you know, have your poster slam dunk, be like a hero, get all those likes on social media. But if you miss, you also look like you feel very stupid. And in this case, if I miss and I lose this game, we're headed to Armageddon, and it's going to be very tough to recover emotionally. So instead, I take the knight on f8. He checks. I go king e7, h7, and now I play rook c1. Now again, I could just take the rook after queen, king c7. The rook, the bishop, and the knight are worth more than the queen here, but why do I want to bother with any of this when I see a way to draw? So I make the check. I play rook h1. I sack the rook, and now I go g5 here, trading off this pawn on f4 for the pawn on g5, and now I'll be able to stop this pawn with the king, and the rest is very elementary. So we get takes, a4. I bring the king closer. Again, if white tries a5, I'm simply just in time here to get the king and stop the pawn. And so he plays rook c8. I go knight e6, a5. Now I play knight c7. Again, cutting off this this rook. The rook was preventing me from moving the king over. Knight cuts off the rook here, and also it stops the pawn from pushing, and white has nothing. Wesley plays king c3. I go f4, rook b8, f3, king d2, and now I just play f2, rook f8. Only way to stop the pawn from queening. King c6 takes, king b5, and now my king has gotten over. I'll eat the pawn, and with a bishop and a knight for the rook, it's a very easy draw. Even if I were to accidentally hang one of them, whether it's rook versus knight or rook versus bishop, that's also a draw. Wesley goes rook f4. I play bishop e6, and now it's very simple because the bishop covers the squares. The rook can't go to c4 or f7. Knight guards the bishop, and I'm just going to eat the pawn next move. So Wesley gives up here by going rook e4, takes, and he sacks the rook, and we end up with king and knight versus king, and this fourth and final game of the match ends in a draw. So what does this mean? This means that I will now play in the final of the winner's bracket tomorrow against either Fabiano Caruana or Vladislav Artemiev. They're currently playing an Armageddon game right now. I don't know the outcome yet, but I will be playing either one of them. But more importantly, by winning this match and being in the final of the winner's bracket, the worst I can do is finish in third place, because I could lose to Fabiano or Vladislav, lose to the winner of the losers bracket, but that still guarantees top three, and only the top three players automatically qualify for the next Chess Champions Tour event. So it's a very, very big win for that reason alone. But overall, it's just great to be winning matches, playing great chess. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap. I'll be back tomorrow with a recap after I play against either Fabiano or Vladislav. But I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to hit that subscribe button below, and we'll be back soon with some great YouTube content. See you soon. Bye, everybody.